you ever wonder how we grow? Like, how do people actually get bigger? How do things get bigger? You all started as a little baby, and then eventually you just got bigger and bigger and bigger, and now you're a big giant person. Well, where'd all that stuff come from that actually makes you what you are? Let's get into it a little bit. First thing that happens is plants, out there in the environment, plants make sugar. They take CO2 from the air, they do a process called photosynthesis, and in that process they use sunlight and water and carbon dioxide from the air, and they take that carbon and the oxygen from the CO2 and they build sugar, whose chemical formula is C6H12O6. It's this hexagon-shaped molecule. And so here's a corn that has been taking lots of sugar, building it inside of its body using the CO2 from the air. So that's carbon coming from the air, building that sugar. Now, the plant has a whole lot of extra sugar, because it doesn't need a whole lot, but it makes a lot. What does it do? It stores it. Makes a big, long chain of sugars using a process called dehydration synthesis, and it's making a long chain to store them. This is called starch. Starch is a molecule made of many, many, many glucose molecules linked together. Now we come along, I love to eat corn, so we eat some corn, we take in some starch. We eat potatoes, we take in starch. We eat anything that has a lot of starch in it, we're taking in these big long chains of glucose molecules. To be clear, it's not glucose at this point, it's starch. Glucose is different than starch. Glucose is all linked together. Then, in our bodies, we're going to do a process called hydrolysis. This happens in our digestive system. Hydrolysis ends up giving us a whole bunch of sugars. So all we're doing is breaking these bonds right here inside our intestines and ending up with a lot of sugars. What do we do with sugars? Some of those sugars are used for energy. We do a process called cellular respiration, or cell respiration for short. We burn those sugars, and it gives us a usable, movable energy source. Sugars by themselves don't give us energy. The process of cell respiration gives us usable energy. So we can use that to do whatever we need to do, move around, whatever. Whatever we don't use, we use a process called dehydration synthesis again. Synthesis because we're building something. We're taking these sugars and we're linking them together. Different than what plants did, because plants made starch, we make a molecule called glycogen. And that molecule gets stored inside our bodies. So whenever we need a piece of sugar, so that we can get some energy out of it, blink, we just pluck this piece off and burn it for energy. We need more, blink, we pluck this piece off, we burn it for energy. So this is stored sugar, this glycogen molecule. And that helps us have a stored energy source. The same thing happens with proteins and all other organic compounds in our bodies. When we eat plants, we're not only taking in starch, but we're taking in plant proteins. Corn is full of proteins. Everything has lots of proteins in it. So we're taking in these plant proteins. Now, to be clear, people always say you are what you eat, right? Well, I ate some asparagus the other night. I am not an asparagus like Archibald Asparagus from VeggieTales. I am a human being. I am not what I eat, even though I ate some asparagus. But there is some truth to this statement. And the truth is that when we digest these proteins, we break them apart. Proteins are made of amino acids. So what are we ending up with? We start with a protein, which is a long chain of amino acids. We do hydrolysis. We break these bonds between the amino acids, and we end up with a whole bunch of amino acids. It's the same building blocks that were used for anything. So what happens inside of our bodies now that we have all these amino acids? We do dehydration synthesis, and now we make human proteins. We don't want corn proteins, they can't help us, but maybe we need human proteins. Proteins build muscle, proteins build bones. We can use these to actually build structures of our body. But we're not building them with corn proteins, we're building them with the same building blocks we got from the corn. So in that way, we kind of are what we eat. What makes the proteins different is the order of those amino acids. So if you look at this plant protein that you got from the corn, you've got this amino acid is the same as that one, but these three are different, and they're in this particular order. The order of the amino acids determines what the protein is going to be, because these amino acids will actually fold into a specific shape. Once it's put back together, it's put in a different order. Notice this one has the two blue ones here at the end. So that gives it a different order. It's going to fold in a different way. It's going to be a different protein, and therefore it's going to do a different job in the body. So there's really two main reasons why we have to break things apart and then put them back together. First is that we don't want plant proteins or plant sugars or plant whatever. We want animal stuff. So we've got to break them apart and then reassemble them into whatever molecules we need. But the second big reason is, well, it's the same kind of an idea here. Let's say you worked at the Smithsonian and you had this big giant skeleton of a Tyrannosaurus Rex, and they were going to do some remodeling in this room, so you had to move it to a different part of the museum. You couldn't just take this whole skeleton and move it to another part of the museum because this door is just a small door. So what would you do? You'd take the skeleton apart, you'd pull each of the pieces apart, you'd carry those through the door to the next room, and then you'd put it back together. Same thing happens in our intestines. We've got only a limited amount of space to get molecules out of our intestines and into our bloodstream. And because there's not enough room, we can't take these giant proteins and push them through those membranes. We've got to break them into small pieces, like amino acids, that are small enough to be able to fit through into our bloodstream so we can transport them where needed, so then we can build the proteins we need where we need them, like in our muscle cells. So that's how we grow. We take materials from the foods that we eat, we break apart the foods that we eat in our intestines into their building blocks. We then put those building blocks back together in a different way so that we can build our own body tissue and muscle mass and everything that we need, and we get bigger. And that's it.